everyone! Welcome to our weird mishmash of an educational TripAdvisor vlog thing slapped together by two kids who don't really know what they're doing. As you could tell by the title, today we are going to Cambodia! Yay! More heat and humidity. Love it. We only spent about a week here, so this episode's going to be pretty short.
We flew to Cambodia with Jetstar Airways on a 2-hour flight. Siem Reap's International Airport only had one runway and no jet bridges, meaning you had to deplane on the ramp itself and walk to the terminal a few hundred feet away. The ground crew didn't want the passengers to be filming while walking, just to be safe. After getting all our luggage, our tour guide, John, picked us up and dropped us off at our hotel. Our rooms were connected and the hotel's pool was nice, although the water was pretty cold. We would be visiting Siem Reap's temples the next day, so we could just relax for now. Well, the time came to brave the hot and humid weather as we spent almost the whole day out. Time to visit more temples. The first one was a little run down, with trees growing from it and crumbling walls surrounding the temple. The second was in much better condition than the first and was much taller. It had 3 terraces as opposed to the first temple's 0. With extremely steep steps over a foot high and less than 10 inches wide, it felt more like climbing a ladder than walking up a flight of stairs. What would normally be fairly easy in cool and dry weather is exhausting and quite difficult in Cambodia's hot and humid weather. The third temple we went to had nothing special in particular about it. It looked quite similar to the previous 2, so we moved on to the fourth and final one we'd visit. Now, the last one. It was the moment we've all been waiting for. Angkor Wat. I'm pretty sure, although most people might not know its name, everyone's at least seen it on the internet or at some Asian restaurants. It's so grand, so spectacular, it's even on Cambodia's flag. The center area is surrounded by a moat over 200 meters wide, so we had to cross it using one of those floaty bridges. The entire park is relatively large with the temple in the center. In fact, it's one of the largest religious monuments in the world, covering over 400 acres. The central structure is surrounded by an outer and inner wall, and then there's the temple part. After climbing up and down several temples in the hot weather, we were all exhausted and ended up only visiting less than half of Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat was designed and built back in the 12th century and was originally a Hindu temple, although it gradually transformed into a Buddhist temple. It's pretty amazing how long it's lasted, though it has been damaged by plants growing on it, war, and some people taking souvenirs. Still, the government has done an excellent job restoring and maintaining the 900-year-old temple. Angkor Wat was cool, but we also discovered a new type of food while we were there. It's called khao lam. Although it is relatively simple in concept, it is delicious. It's sticky rice, stuffed along with spices and other stuff in a bamboo segment. The entire thing is then slow roasted over hot coals. To get the stuff inside, you have to peel the bamboo open like a banana. Except the banana peels are thick, dry, and splintery. You can then eat it like you would a normal banana, peeling it back as you go, although the peels aren't too flexible and end up smearing bits of sticky rice onto anything it touches.
The next day was going to be an excursion to a giant lake called Tonle Sap, which is the biggest freshwater lake in Southeast Asia with an area at about 2,700 square kilometers. The Great Lake is the second most popular attraction in Siem Reap after Angkor Wat. Tonle Sap is home to mangrove forests, crocodile farms, and a massive amount of fish that feeds a good portion of Cambodia. There are a few villages scattered around the lake, actually on the lake, either with floating or stilted houses. The people here make a living mostly off of fishing and have this really cool net spinner to get the fish out. When the villagers complete all their chores and have nothing to do, they sometimes take tours for boat rides for a small fee. We went for one, splitting up into 2 groups because there's no way we would all be able to squeeze onto one without capsizing it. The lady took us through the mangrove forest, with the added bonus that we would be partially sheltered from the sun. Every now and then she would bend over and pluck a snail from a tree and just toss it into a metal bowl. I don't know if it was for us to look at or for her to eat. Maybe it was both. After that, we came back to the restaurant and ordered some food. Nothing too crazy, just some things John recommended to us. 20 minutes later and the food hasn't arrived yet. Another 20 minutes? Nothing. Finally, after a stupidly long wait of about 45 minutes, the food arrived. It was pretty good, but not really worth the wait. After lunch, we hung out for a bit, checked out the crocodiles and other animals, then headed back. And that was the end of the day.
One of the places my dad really wanted to visit was the Cambodian killing fields. Giant mass graves where millions of people were killed during the Khmer Rouge in the 1970s. Under Pol Pot's regime, anyone who committed any sort of political crime, which basically included doing anything that the Khmer Rouge didn't like, was sent to a camp for re-education. So they were basically sent to gulags where they were either worked to death or executed if they survived. There are thousands of mass graves scattered across the country, so we went to one of the graves near Siem Reap. Essentially, it was a museum. There were a dozen or so buildings around a large monument, which was filled with bones and skulls from countless people.
To lighten the mood after visiting the killing fields, we went to the Angkor Silk Farm. The tour was actually really interesting, and we even managed to dodge the huge crowds. The silk produced here is mulberry silk. It's considered to be the finest and highest quality of all of them, and it comes from the mulberry silkworm. Silkworms have been domesticated to the point that they're almost entirely dependent on humans. The domesticated moth lost its camouflage and is too disproportionate to fly, so they need help finding a mate. That's really sad. When it's ready to turn into a moth, the silkworm spins a cocoon around itself and goes through metamorphosis. I'm sure you already learned this. In order to escape its cocoon, the moth chews or dissolves its way through. This damages the thread, so people created a solution. Just don't let them leave. The cocoons are usually dumped into boiling water, killing the silkworms in the process. They can be killed in other ways, but this is the most common. The silk in the cocoon loosens, allowing a worker to slowly unwind the strands. Then there's a lot of spinning, sorting, some dyeing, more spinning, and then bam! Silk ready for weaving. The traditional way of silk weaving is done with lots of patience and skill. I don't think I really need to explain how to show you. Whoosh. Cool, right? Anyway, once the tour is finished, we checked out the gift shop, looked at stuff, and didn't buy anything, as usual.
John took us to a large reservoir near Siem Reap called the West Beret. The rectangular reservoir is around 8 kilometers long and 2 wide, and all of that was hand-cut over 1,000 years ago without the use of any heavy construction equipment. Although we didn't get into the water or anything, we stopped by a few shops atop one of the levees. There, we bought some shirts, sugarcane juice, and a few bags of Kampot pepper.
Kampot pepper is from the Kampot province and comes in 4 types: green, black, white, and red. They're all from the same plant, but are picked at different times and processed differently. Green Kampot pepper is undried and cooked fresh. It doesn't keep for very long, so people have to use it fairly quickly. Black peppercorns are probably the easiest to find. They're picked when they're fully developed and green, but turn black during the drying process. Soaking black peppercorns in water and removing the skin creates white pepper, which isn't as spicy as its original. Then there's the most expensive variety. When Kampot peppercorns are left on the vine and given more time to fully ripen, they turn red. They keep their color even after drying and are the sweetest and most expensive of the bunch because of the extra time it takes to grow. If anyone out there is like, oh, but I could just use normal pepper, right? And it's basically the same thing. Pepper, pepper. You would be terribly mistaken. Kampot pepper is way better, and you don't need to be a spice expert to know it. This is all coming from a girl who can't tell the difference between parsley and cilantro. So, yes, Kampot pepper is worth buying. So we asked John to take us to a grocery store just to see what kind of snacks they had, which is what we do with all the other countries. But apparently there are no grocery stores here, so he took us to an artisan store. It has a Frenchish name that I'm probably gonna destroy, so I'm just gonna throw it up on the screen. Whoosh. They had soaps, oils, lots of spices, incense, and the usual things that stores like these have. Outside were some women weaving small baskets and containers out of dried leaves. Then those went upstairs to more workers for packaging. There was also a nice little garden in the back with a lady making candles. My dad bought some spices to cook with when he got back to the U.S. On our last day with John, Dad wanted to have dinner with him and his family, but his wife was working as a waiter for a restaurant. How convenient. His wife seemed pretty surprised that her family just showed up out of the blue with a bunch of strangers, but she ended up waiting us. The food was tasty, a little pricey, but tasty. After dinner, we said goodbye and parted ways.
After spending almost a week in the Meridian, we moved hotels to a Park Hyatt literally 5 minutes down the road. The Park Hyatt is one of the Hyatt chain's luxury brands, and the hotel itself really didn't disappoint. It had this really nice pool, and everything about the hotel's interior just gave off some really posh vibes. As tourists, we didn't own any cars or bikes, so we couldn't go anywhere on our own. One of the easiest ways to get from A to B is to call these little bike things called tuk-tuks. It's basically a really big tricycle with room for passengers in the back row. They're kind of like small taxis and are pretty fun to ride.
Dad took us to see a cirque show by a group called Fair, the Cambodian Circus. There were pictures of contortionists, and as an individual who loves being bendy, I was pretty excited. We had to wait for quite a bit, so we just aimlessly wandered around until it was time to go in. And the show started, and it turned out to be pretty amazing. The performers looked like they were genuinely having fun, so they could either be really good actors or actually enjoying themselves. They didn't even need fancy costumes. There was kind of a story-ish, I don't know, a lot of it was just kind of making fun of tourists. No, white mask. To their credit, the idea was quite creative. They incorporated the skills with the story in a way that made it look like they were just doing mundane, everyday tasks, but a lot cooler.
We spent the rest of our time in Cambodia, chilling in our nice rooms in the Park Hyatt. It was a nice and expensive hotel, and we didn't want to waste all that money. Although, we went out a few times to have dinner at the local marketplace. On our last day, John gave us a ride to the airport, and we flew back to Singapore. And that wraps up Cambodia.
Short, yes, but fun, yes.
I think it makes everything better to have a good, friendly tour guide.
Thank you for watching. I'll give a digital hug to you right now. Hug. Everyone's friends. Bye!